Hey guys, tonight we are gently peeling back the dusty, sun-baked scroll of history to explore something truly aromatic. Imagine, if you will, a time when a pinch of powder or a dried berry held more value than gold. You're standing at the edge of a vast, shimmering network of trails, the air thick with the scent of the unknown cinnamon, strange peppers, all carried on weary camels. This isn't just a trade route. It's the Silk Road, a legend woven from desert dust and the intense desire for flavors that transformed the mundane. Of course, your chances of making it from one end to the other with your cargo, or even your life, intact. Let's just say you'd have better odds guessing next week's weather perfectly. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I love seeing how far these sleepy stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel the grit of sand already. Even though we're just at the conceptual edge of this journey, a fine, almost imperceptible layer settling on your skin. The term Silk Road, or Seidenstraße, if you're feeling particularly 19th century German about it, is actually a relatively modern label. It was coined in 1877 by a geographer named Baron Ferdinand von Richthofen, uncle, incidentally, to the rather more famous Red Baron of aerial combat fame. A little piece of trivia to gently tuck away as you settle in. This name, Silk Road, sounds so beautifully singular, so romantically defined, perhaps conjuring images of a golden, paved highway stretching from east to west, complete with ancient service stations run by surprisingly well-groomed desert nomads offering artisanal flatbreads. The reality, as you're probably already sensing through the haze of your encroaching sleepiness, is far more sprawling, far more wonderfully messy. Picture not a single easily followed thread, but an immense, tangled web, a delicate yet resilient capillary system of roots. These pathways stretch over 7,000 miles, perhaps even more if you count every little detour and side hustle track. This network shimmers across the horizon, traversing some of the planet's most formidable landscapes. You'd find yourself, if you were a trader then, facing burning deserts like the Taklamakan, a name that some local folklore translates with chilling simplicity. As you go in, you don't come out. Definitely not the kind of slogan you'd see on a modern tourist brochure, is it? Visit the Taklamakan. You might even return. Doesn't quite have the ring. These paths, these lifelines of commerce and culture, also bravely climb over treacherous, snow-capped mountain ranges. Imagine the Pamirs, the roof of the world, where the air is so thin it feels like trying to breathe spun glass, and every upward step is a monumental, lung-searing effort for both you and your heavily laden pack animals, be they Bactrian camels, with their swaying, rhythmic gait, or sure-footed, if somewhat grumpy, mules. The routes meander through surprisingly fertile river valleys that appear like emerald ribbons in an otherwise ochre tapestry. They skirt around vast, inhospitable steppes, where the wind howls with a loneliness that seeps into your very bones, and link not just grand, bustling city-states, but also tiny, forgotten villages, each a small spark of humanity in the immense wilderness. Historians still argue with the gentle, academic ferocity we've come to appreciate whether the true genesis of this vast network was a deliberate imperial policy from Han China seeking Western alliances and horses, or a more organic, almost accidental, creeping expansion of existing local and regional trade networks that gradually, like shy tendrils, interlinked over centuries, and what precious cargo is being painstakingly conveyed across this immense, perilous expanse, fueling this incredible human endeavor. Silk, of course, gives the network its globally recognized name. You can almost feel it now, that magical, shimmering textile, spun by remarkably secretive silkworms munching on mulberry leaves. In faraway China, for centuries, the process of its creation was a closely guarded state secret, and the fabric itself was so profoundly desired in the West, particularly in the Roman Empire, that it was, at times, literally worth its weight in gold. Think of the Roman statesman Pliny the Elder, a man who never met an extravagance he didn't want to write a grumpy treatise about. He complained endlessly about the moral decay and the catastrophic economic drain on the empire caused by these luxurious, translucent silk imports, which, he felt, did little to preserve a Roman matron's modesty. One can only imagine his reaction to modern athleisure wear. He probably would have needed a fainting couch and a stiff cup of, well, probably not spice-infused wine, given his austerity. But tonight, our sleepy focus, our gently drifting attention, moves from the soft rustle of silk to the far more pungent, more deeply evocative, and arguably more transformative cargo, the spices. Even as you relax, letting your breathing deepen, you can try to conjure them. You're in a caravanserai, perhaps, one of those ancient roadside inns that were the lifeblood of the Silk Road. It's a dusty, sun-baked courtyard, probably, teeming with life. Hundreds of camels are groaning, coughing, and generally exuding that uniquely potent aroma that only a hard-working camel can produce. The air, despite this rich layer of animal musk, is electric with something else entirely, something that cuts through the dust and the fatigue. It's a developing symphony of smells, a complex perfume you can't quite place, yet find utterly intoxicating. There's the warm, sweet, almost cinnamon-like embrace of cinnamon bark, carefully stripped from trees in distant, humid lands like Ceylon, which you now know as Sri Lanka, or perhaps cassia from southern China. There's the sharp, invigorating, slightly citrusy promise of dried ginger root from India, a knobbly, unassuming thing that holds incredible fire within. And beneath it all, the mysterious, smoky, slightly medicinal whisper of cardamom pods. Gathered from jungle clearings thousands of miles away, each tiny seed a universe of flavor. You can almost taste the ever-present dust of the journey, a fine, pervasive powder that coats your lips, your clothes, your very soul. But beneath it, or perhaps mingling with it in a strange, earthy perfume, are these extraordinary, potent aromas. These aren't just flavorings, not in the casual way you might reach for a jar of something to sprinkle onto your dinner. In the eras we're drifting through tonight, these spices are pure, unadulterated power. They are potent medicine, believed to cure ailments, from a common cough to a broken heart. They are essential components of sacred rituals, their smoke, carrying prayers to the heavens. They are an unambiguous, instantly recognizable statement of immense wealth, a display of your connection to a world far beyond anyone's immediate, dusty, and often quite limited horizon. Think for a moment about the food you might encounter. If you were, say, a moderately well-off citizen in Rome, or a Sogdian merchant pausing on your long trek, or even a Byzantine courtier, your daily fare, for all its local charm, could be, well, let's be kind and say somewhat bland, monotonous. Even preservation techniques, before the age of refrigeration, were rudimentary. often involving heroic amounts of salt or drying things, until they achieved a texture not unlike old leather. Not exactly a carnival for the taste buds. Now, introduce just a pinch of black pepper, a mere dash of cloves, perhaps a delicate scraping of nutmeg. Suddenly, that heavily salted, preserved meat, that simple barley gruel, or that slightly tooled piece of bread explodes with an unforeseen complexity. It's not just sustenance anymore. It's an experience, a tiny, brilliant spark of the exotic, igniting an otherwise deeply ordinary meal. And the sources of these incredible treasures. For centuries, they were shrouded in the deepest mystery, often quite deliberately so by those who profited from their trade. Merchants, you see, were the original masters of marketing spin, the ancient godfathers of branding. They'd return from their unimaginably long and perilous journeys with their precious powders, their dried berries, their fragrant barks, and they would tell the most wonderfully wild tales of the lands these spices came from. Cinnamon, the great historian Herodotus informed the ancient Greeks, was collected from the nests of gigantic birds in Arabia, fierce winged beasts that constructed their lofty homes from the finest cinnamon sticks, high on inaccessible cliffs. The only way to get it, apparently, was to trick these formidable birds by leaving out large, heavy pieces of ox meat for them to carry to their nests. The weight of the meat would supposedly cause the cinnamon stick nests to come crashing too. The ground, ready for brave, and presumably very fast, collectors. You can just imagine the health and safety briefing for that particular enterprise. Whether Herodotus fully believed these tales, or his sources did, or if it was all a brilliant, concerted ploy to inflate the price and fiercely deter any potential competitors, is part of the enduring, delightful fun of it all. These stories certainly added to the allure, the perceived danger, and, of course, the astronomical price tag. Gold was heavy, yes, and certainly valuable. But spices, they were relatively lightweight, incredibly potent, and packed tight with the intoxicating mystique of the unknown, the dangerous, the almost mythical. This pungent cargo wasn't just seasoning. It was the condensed essence of distant, sun-drenched, dreamlike lands. A tangible piece of a world most people could only ever imagine. You're beginning to truly understand, aren't you, as you drift and float, that this Silk Road is so much less about a single, physical road and so much more about a vast, invisible current. A relentless flow of humanity's deepest desires, its greatest fears, its quiet innovations, and its incredible, enduring resilience. All of this carried on the desert wind, fragrant with spices that were, quite literally, worth a king's ransom, or at the very least, a very serious and noticeable dent in a wealthy noble's treasury. The very idea of it, shimmering therein, the heat haze of distant history, is enough to make you feel a little wonderfully, peacefully, lightheaded. And as that lightheadedness settles into a comfortable, drifting sensation, let your mind wander even further back, before the term Silk Road was ever dreamt of, to the very first whispers of these potent aromatics making their slow, almost tentative way across the ancient world. You're tuning your senses now to a time when the world felt infinitely larger, its distant corners truly unknown, and the arrival of something as simple as a fragrant piece of bark from an unseen land was nothing short of miraculous. These aren't just commodities yet. They are messages from a mythical elsewhere, imbued with mystery and a kind of primal magic. Let's focus on two of the earliest stars of this aromatic show, cinnamon and its close cousin, cassia. You can almost smell them now, can't you? That warm, sweet, slightly woody fragrance that speaks of comfort, of holidays, of something special. Today, you might casually sprinkle cinnamon on your morning oatmeal, or find it swirled into a pastry, a familiar friend. But imagine a time when its origins were as fantastical as the spice itself was rare. For millennia, these two barks, often used interchangeably or confused for one another, were among the most coveted botanical products in the world. Historians and botanists still argue with gentle persistence about which ancient textual references point specifically to true cinnamon, Cinnamon verum or Zelanicum, primarily from Sri Lanka, and which refer to the more robust, reddish-brown quills of cassia, Cinnamon cassia from China and Southeast Asia. It's a spicy debate that has seasoned academic journals for quite some time. You find yourself, perhaps, in ancient Egypt, a civilization already old when Rome was but a collection of mud huts. Here, cinnamon and cassia are not primarily for flavoring your fig cakes, though they might have been used in some elite kitchens. Their true value lies in something far more profound. Their role in conversing with the gods and preserving the mortal body for its journey into the afterlife. The scent of burning cinnamon, rich and enveloping, would have filled the air in temples, a fragrant offering believed to appease the deities. And in the meticulous, sacred process of embalming, these spices played a crucial part. There's a mainstream historical fact for you: that Egyptians were using cinnamon and cassia in their mummification rituals as early as 2000 BCE, possibly earlier. They weren't just for masking odors, though they certainly helped with that. Imagine the scent of a high-status funeral without them. No thank you. They were believed to have powerful, preservative and purifying properties, essential for ensuring the body remained intact for its eternal voyage. They were, in essence, ingredients for immortality. Consider the journey these barks undertook. True cinnamon, with its delicate, complex flavor, grew predominantly on the island of Sri Lanka, a distant jewel in the Indian Ocean. Cassia, bolder and spicier, hailed from the forests of southern China and mainland Southeast Asia. Long before, the Silk Road was a somewhat defined network. These precious aromatics trickled along ancient sea routes, across the Indian Ocean, up the Red Sea, or overland through countless middlemen, each adding their own markup, each shrouded in their own layer of secrecy. You can picture small, sturdy ships braving monsoon winds, their holds protecting a cargo far more valuable than most metals. The sailors themselves might have had little idea of the ultimate destination or the immense profits reaped at the end. Off the line, they were just one link in a very long, very lucrative chain. The mystical allure of cinnamon and cassia wasn't just confined to Egypt. Across cultures, their rarity and potent fragrance lent them an aura of the sacred and the powerful. In ancient Greece and Rome, they were used in perfumes, incenses, and as key ingredients in expensive spiced wines like conditum. Imagine a Roman banquet, the air thick with the scent of roasting meats, loud conversation, and then, cutting through it all, the exotic fragrance of cinnamon sprinkled into the wine. A mark of extreme wealth and sophistication. It was a way to say, I am so rich. I can literally drink a spice that has traveled further than most people will in their entire lifetimes. It's the ancient equivalent of casually mentioning your private jet, really. There's a little joke for you. A gentle nudge in your sleepy side. And the stories about their origins, as we touched upon with Herodotus's fantastical cinnamon birds. These tales were vital. They protected the trade monopolies and justified the sky-high prices. If people believed that collecting cinnamon involved battling mythical beasts or undertaking perilous journeys to the very edges of the world, they were less likely to question paying a fortune for a few sticks of bark. It's classic supply and demand, with a hefty dose of creative storytelling. There's even a quirky tidbit from Pliny the Elder, him again, always a good source for a bit of ancient grumbling or a fascinating detail, who mentioned that cinnamon was sometimes used to perfume bedding and clothes. A truly luxurious practice. Imagine your toga smelling faintly of a spice market. Quite the fashion statement. Some even whispered of its properties as an aphrodisiac, adding another layer to its mystique and desirability. The actual harvesting process, at least for true cinnamon, was far less fantastical but no less laborious. It involves skilled hands carefully peeling the inner bark of young cinnamon tree shoots during the rainy season when the bark is supple. These delicate strips are then dried and curled into the familiar quills. Cassia harvesting is a bit more robust, often involving larger pieces of bark. But for the end consumer in Thebes, Athens, or Rome, these practical details were unknown. What they held in their hands was not just a spice. It was a whisper of an almost mythical East, a tangible piece of a world they could only dream of. A world of strange beasts, powerful gods, and untold riches. You can feel the weight of these ancient beliefs, can't you? The sheer power imputed to these fragrant fragments of trees from half a world away. It wasn't just about making food taste better. It was about connecting with the divine, cheating death, displaying status, and perhaps even finding love. It makes your modern spice rack seem a little mundane by comparison, doesn't it? Though, arguably, having easy access to cinnamon for your apple pie without having to outwit a giant bird is a definite perk of modern life. And that, my friend, is sleepy joke number 3 for this section. These ancient spice whispers, carried on desert winds and ocean currents, laid the very first pathways of what would eventually become the grand, sprawling tapestry of the Silk Road. A network built not just on the desire for silk, but on the even more primal, more deeply human yearning for the flavors and fragrances that promise to transform everyday life into something extraordinary. And as you drift, you can almost catch that faint, sweet woody scent on the air, a timeless perfume from the dawn of global trade. But not all ancient whispers have carried through to our modern kitchens. Not all those fragrant trails have remained open. Some faded into an intriguing, almost sorrowful silence, becoming legends themselves, their tastes and scents lost to the winds of time. Imagine now, as that warm, familiar scent of cinnamon gently recedes from your senses, being replaced by something else. Something green, perhaps a little wild, sharply resinous, and so utterly, frustratingly irreplaceable that its absence still echoes in the dusty pages of ancient texts. You're about to encounter a true phantom of the pantry, a ghost of a flavor. The legendary lost spice, Silphium. Picture yourself on the sun-drenched coast of North Africa, in the ancient Greek colony of Cyrene, nestled in what is now modern-day Libya. This region, for a few precious centuries, was the only place on Earth where this celebrated plant chose to grow. Silphium, or asafoetida, as the Romans often called its resin, wasn't cultivated in neat rows like your garden herbs. Oh no, it was a wild child, a stubborn gift of a very specific patch of earth, reputedly a narrow coastal strip about 125 miles long and perhaps 30 or 40 miles wide. And for this reason, Cyrene held an absolute monopoly on one of the ancient world's most sought-after treasures. In fact, Silphium was so central to Cyrene's identity and economy that they proudly stamped its image on their silver and gold coins. For centuries, there's your mainstream fact for tonight. You can still see these coins in museums, a little metallic ghost of a plant that fed an empire's desires, a heart-shaped seed pod, a sturdy stalk, a spray of fennel-like leaves, a currency literally backed by flavor. What exactly was this botanical superstar? Well, that's part of the enigma, since it vanished completely, likely sometime in the 1st century CE. We can only piece together its identity from ancient descriptions and by looking at its living relatives. Most scholars believe it belonged to the perilous genus, part of the carrot and fennel family. Think of plants like asafoetida or giant fennel, which share a certain pungency and resinous quality. Silphium was described as having a thick, perennial root, a tall, hollow stalk that was eaten as a vegetable, perhaps roasted or boiled, and delicate, parsley-like leaves. Its flowers, arranged in an umbel-like Queen Anne's lace, produced those distinctively heart-shaped seeds or fruits, which were also highly prized. But the real treasure for many was the laser, the oleogum resin that oozed from an incision made in the root or lower stem, a potent, aromatic goo that was the essence of Silphium and its uses. Oh, they were manifold, bordering on the miraculous. According to ancient writers, as a culinary spice, it was indispensable in the kitchens of wealthy Greeks and Romans. Apicius, the famed Roman gourmand whose cookbook offers a fascinating, if sometimes alarming, glimpse into imperial Roman cuisine, includes Silphium in countless recipes. It was used to flavor everything from sauces for roasted meats and seafood, to delicate broths, and even, apparently, to make flamingo taste its best. One can only imagine the trial and error that went into that particular culinary discovery. Needs more Silphium, Lucius. The flamingo is a bit bland tonight. There's a gentle jest for you. Its taste profile is lost to us, of course, but descriptions hint at something pungent, perhaps a little garlicky or oniony, but also with a unique sweetness or sharpness that set it apart. Perhaps it was the ancient world's umami bomb, that secret ingredient that made everything taste more itself beyond. The kitchen, Silphium, was a veritable panacea in the ancient medicine cabinet. Pliny the Elder, our ever-reliable chronicler of all things curious, lists dozens of medicinal applications. It was prescribed for coughs, sore throats, fevers, indigestion, warts, dog bites, sciatica, epilepsy. You name it, Silphium could probably take a swing at curing it, or so they believed. It was the ancient equivalent of that one friend who insists essential oils can fix your Wi-Fi. But perhaps its most whispered about, and, for many, its most crucial use, was in the realm of women's health. The seeds in the resin were widely believed to be effective as a contraceptive and an abortifacient. This made it not just a luxury, but a plant that offered a degree of reproductive control in an era where such things were rare and often dangerous. The distinctive heart shape of its seeds, so prominently displayed on Cyrenian coins, has even led some to speculate that this is one of the ancient origins of the heart symbol we associate with love today, a subtle nod to Silphium's role in romance and family planning. It's a lovely thought, though a direct link is, like much about Silphium, a matter of ongoing scholarly discussion. So what happened? How does a plant so valuable, so central to an entire region's economy, so deeply embedded in the culture and medicine of great civilizations, simply vanish? The most common theory is straightforward, if rather sad: overharvesting and overgrazing. The demand was insatiable. The Cyrenians tried to regulate its harvest, dividing the land into zones and controlling who could gather it. But the lure of profit was too strong, both locally and from foreign powers, who eventually took control of the region. Sheep and cattle, it seems, also found Silphium particularly delicious, which didn't help its chances of regeneration. Pliny reports that in his time, in the mid-1st century CE, only a single stalk of Silphium was found. It was considered such a curiosity that it was plucked and sent as a gift to Emperor Nero. Imagine that, the very last of its kind. A botanical Julius Caesar presented to an emperor who probably had no idea of its true significance beyond being a rare dinner flavoring. A rather ignominious end for such a legendary plant. Scholars continue to debate the precise cocktail of causes that led to its ultimate demise. Was it purely human greed and mismanagement? Did climate change play a role, altering the specific, narrow environmental conditions it needed to thrive? Were there changes in land use, perhaps a shift towards more intensive agriculture that destroyed its wild habitats? Or was its cultivation, if indeed it was ever truly cultivated beyond a managed wild harvest, a delicate art that was lost as control of Cyrenaica passed through different hands? We simply don't know for sure. The themselves seemed unable, or perhaps unwilling, to cultivate it outside its natural zone, adding to its mystique and its vulnerability. They literally had one job: keep the magic plant going. And, well, history shows us how that turned out. A little bit of gentle sarcasm there, as we drift. The loss of Silphium was lamented even in ancient times. Attempts were made to find substitutes. Other related perilous plants from Syria or Persia were tried, but none, it was said, possessed the same delicate aroma or potent effects. It was truly unique, a flavor and a medicinal powerhouse lost forever. You can almost feel the frustration of ancient physicians and chefs reaching for an ingredient that was simply no longer there. It's a quiet green tragedy, a reminder of the fragility of natural treasures, even those held in the highest esteem. As you settle deeper into your rest, let the ghost of Silphium's lost scent, that unknown, unknowable aroma, be a soft, intriguing mystery that lulls you further into the quiet realms of history and sleep. While Silphium's unique essence has dissolved into the mists of time, a poignant, fragrant ghost in history's vast pantry, another, far more pungent and remarkably resilient character, was already making its fiery, decisive mark on the world's palate. Feel that ghostly, resinous aroma of lost Silphium, gently replaced now by a sharper, warmer, almost ticklish sensation that dances in your nostrils, perhaps even causing the faintest urge to, well, to sneeze. Yes, you know this one intimately. It's pepper, specifically black pepper, the undisputed king of spices, a tiny, unassuming berry that embarked on an arduous journey from the lush shores of India to become, quite literally, black gold across the known world. Your mind drifts now to the Malabar coast, in what is today Kerala, in southwestern India. Picture dense, tropical forests, the air thick with humidity and the chirping of unseen creatures. Here, the pepper vine, Piper nigrum, climbs elegantly up supporting trees. Its long tendrils, called drupes, heavy with clusters of small, round berries. These berries begin green, then turn red as they ripen, and finally, when picked and dried, in the sun, they shrivel and blacken into the peppercorns you'd recognize instantly. It seems so simple, doesn't it? A dried berry. Yet, from this humble origin, it would conquer the culinary world and command fortunes. Its ascent was indeed fiery, both in taste and in the fervor it inspired. long before it became a standard fixture. On every dining table, next to the salt shaker, a modern convenience that would have utterly baffled an ancient Roman. Like explaining Wi-Fi to a velociraptor, black pepper was a luxury of almost unimaginable proportions. There's your first sleepy chuckle. The Greeks knew of it, though it was rare and incredibly expensive. But it was under the Roman Empire that pepper truly hit the big time. Roman traders, harnessing the monsoon winds, established direct sea routes to India, bypassing some of the overland Silk Road intermediaries, though much pepper still traveled those dusty paths as well. You can imagine Roman ships, laden with amphorae of wine, olive oil, and glassware, sailing east, and returning with holds packed not just with silks and cotton, but with sack upon sack of these potent little berries. The journey was, by any measure, arduous, whether by sea, facing storms and pirates, or over land, through deserts, mountains, and territories controlled by various tribes and potentates, each demanding their cut. Of course, getting pepper from India to the Mediterranean was a long, dangerous, and phenomenally expensive undertaking. Every hand it passed through, every mile it traveled, added to its cost. This wasn't like popping down to the local supermarket because you've run out. This was an international operation involving vast risk and even vaster potential rewards. And why was it so coveted? Well, for one, its unique, pungent flavor. In a world where food preservation often meant heavy salting or smoking, pepper offered a way to cut through the monotony, to add a spark of excitement, a blast of warmth that enlivened even the dullest of dishes. It was a taste sensation unlike anything grown locally in Europe. Then there were its perceived medicinal properties. Ancient physicians, from Galen onwards, prescribed pepper for a host of ailments, as a digestive aid, a stimulant, a cure for colds, and even with a hopeful glint in their eye, as an aphrodisiac. A little sprinkle to cure your ills and perhaps improve your love life. It's no wonder it was popular, but beyond taste and medicine, pepper became an ultimate status symbol. To be able to afford pepper, to serve it at your banquets, was a clear and unambiguous statement of wealth and sophistication. It showed you had connections, that you were a person of the world, able to access the exotic treasures of the distant East. It was the ancient equivalent of having the latest chariot model, with all the optional extras. Historians still debate whether its initial widespread adoption in Roman kitchens was driven more by a genuine appreciation for its unique sensory kick, its perceived medicinal benefits, or simply as another conspicuous way to display one's wealth and worldliness. Perhaps, like many things, it was a bit of all three. Its value became legendary, so much so that it was often used as a form of currency. Rents were paid in pepper, dowries included pepper, and victorious generals demanded pepper as tribute. One of the most famous examples of this are mainstream. Fact for this section occurred in 408 CE when Alaric the Goth besieged Rome. He demanded a colossal ransom to spare the city. Among his demands were thousands of pounds of gold and silver, silks, hides, and, quite specifically, 3,000 pounds of peppercorns. Imagine that, a barbarian at the gates, not just wanting your treasure, but also your spice rack emptied. It speaks volumes about how precious this black gold truly was. Of course, with such high value came the temptation for skullduggery. Unscrupulous traders were known to adulterate their precious pepper supplies, mixing in other less valuable berries like juniper or buckthorn, or even little clay pellets to increase the weight. You had to know your merchant, or have a very discerning palate. And then there were the stories, much like those surrounding cinnamon, designed to inflate its rarity and the dangers of its acquisition. Tales circulated in Europe of pepper forests in India guarded by fiery serpents, which had to be driven away by burning the forests, supposedly giving the peppercorns their characteristic black, wrinkled appearance. It's a wonderfully dramatic image, isn't it? Far more exciting than we picked them and left them in the sun for a bit. That's our second little jest. These tall tales added to the mystique and, naturally, kept the prices sky-high. This king of spices continued its reign throughout the Middle Ages. It was a staple in the kitchens of castles and monasteries. Its presence a hallmark of wealth and good taste. It spurred exploration, as European powers later sought direct sea routes to the east to break the Venetian and Ottoman monopolies on the spice trade, ultimately leading to figures like Vasco da Gama reaching India by sea. All this for a tiny berry. It's quite something to ponder as you drift along, how this one small, fiery fruit from a distant land could shape economies, drive exploration, and become such an enduring symbol of flavor and fortune. The journey of pepper, from a humble vine on the Malabar coast to the tables of emperors and kings, is a testament to its potent allure. A truly fiery ascent that changed the taste of the world, one sneeze-inducing pinch at a time. But as the robust, familiar aroma of black pepper still tingles faintly in your senses, let's complicate the peppery part of our sleepy story just a little. Imagine, if you will, that our familiar round friend, black pepper, the undisputed king we just discussed, actually had an older, perhaps more sophisticated, and for a very long time, more highly esteemed sibling sharing the ancient spice stage. You're now drifting towards another member of the Piper family, a character with a subtly different kind of fire, a more complex warmth, and a reign that, in the West at least, has largely been lost to the mists of culinary history. Allow me to introduce you to long pepper. Picture this intriguing spice. It doesn't come in neat little spherical peppercorns. Instead, long pepper, primarily Piper longum from the hotter parts of India, or its close relative Piper retrofractum from Java and other Indonesian islands, looks like a tiny, elongated, dark brown to black mulberry, or perhaps a miniature nobly catkin from a birch tree. It's actually a composite fruit, with many minuscule fruitlets fused together around a central stalk. It's less berry and more bizarre little twig of concentrated flavor. Not quite as aesthetically pleasing for your pepper mill, perhaps, which might be one tiny reason for its eventual dip in popularity. You know how it is with trends. Sometimes even spices need to be Instagram ready. A little modern jest for you there. Now, let's talk about its taste, because this is where long pepper truly sang its unique song. If black pepper offers a straightforward, pungent heat, long pepper provides a more complex symphony. It's certainly hot, often described as hotter than black pepper, but its heat is accompanied by surprising sweetness, an earthy, almost woody depth, and intriguing notes reminiscent of cinnamon, nutmeg, cardamom, and even a whisper of anise. It's like black pepper went to a very exclusive finishing school and took up aromatherapy as a hobby. This complexity made it incredibly sought after in ancient times, and this is the heart of its lost reign. Long pepper was known to the ancient Greeks well before black pepper became common, or at least they arrived in the Mediterranean world around the same time. Theophrastus, the Greek philosopher and successor to Aristotle, often called the father of botany, described it in the 4th century BCE, which gives you an idea of its early presence in Europe. There's your mainstream historical fact for this section. For centuries, from ancient Rome through the Middle Ages and even into the Renaissance, long pepper was often the preferred and more expensive member of the pepper family. Pliny the Elder, who clearly had strong opinions about all spices, valued long pepper at nearly twice the price of black pepper. It was the premium option, the connoisseur's choice. You can imagine ancient Roman chefs, and later their medieval counterparts, carefully grating or pounding these precious little spikes to release their intricate fragrance into rich sauces, spiced wines, and elaborate meat dishes. Its ability to provide both heat and a complex aromatic sweetness made it incredibly versatile. It wasn't just about adding a kick. It was about building layers of flavor, a culinary sophistication that was highly prized. It featured prominently in ancient Indian Ayurvedic medicine as pipali, revered for its warming, stimulating, and digestive properties, and this medicinal reputation certainly traveled with it along the trade routes, adding to its value and allure in the West. So, if long pepper was so beloved, so complex, and so valuable, why did it fade from European culinary fashion, becoming a relative unknown in Western kitchens today, while black pepper reigns supreme? Just why long pepper gradually ceded its spicy throne in European kitchens to its rounder cousin is a topic that culinary historians still gently mull over, like a slow-simmered ancient sauce. One theory is simply about supply and cost. As trade routes evolved and black pepper cultivation perhaps became more widespread or easier to manage on a larger scale, its price may have eventually undercut that of long pepper. Another idea is that the flavor profile of long pepper, with its intense sweetness and complex notes, fell out of favor as European tastes began to shift in the early modern period, perhaps influenced by the arrival of even newer, more fiery spices like chili, peppers from the Americas, or maybe, just maybe, those little round peppercorns were simply easier to grind in the newly fashionable pepper mills that started appearing. The exact reasons are likely a combination of factors, a slow drift rather than a sudden overthrow. A quirky little tidbit for you. Long pepper was a key ingredient in many ancient medicinal concoctions called electuaries. These were essentially medicinal pastes, where the often bitter or pungent herbs and spices were mixed with honey or syrup to make them more palatable. Imagine a medieval apothecary carefully measuring out powdered long pepper, ginger, and other exotic ingredients, blending them into a sweet, sticky paste designed to cure everything from a cough to general weariness. It was the original spoonful of sugar helping the medicine go down. Only the medicine itself was also rather exciting. Some ancient texts, including, rather surprisingly, the Kama Sutra, also mention long pepper for its warming and stimulating qualities, suggesting its uses went beyond just seasoning your stew, if you catch my drift. This was all handled with ancient discretion, of course. As you continue to drift, imagine holding one of these strange little spikes. Feel its rough texture, see its deep, dark color. Crush it gently in your mind and release that complex, warm, sweet, and peppery aroma. It's a scent that once graced the tables of emperors and the medicine bags of revered healers. It's a forgotten rock star of the spice world, overshadowed by its more straightforward sibling. There's Jess number 3 for you, as we honor this once mighty spice. The lost reign of long pepper is a gentle reminder that tastes change, empires fall, and even the most prized flavors can slowly fade into obscurity, waiting patiently in the quiet corners of history for a curious mind like yours to rediscover their fascinating story. And as your mind rediscovers these faded flavors, like the almost ghostly perfume of long pepper, let it also wander directly into the very heart of where these spicy dramas, these aromatic exchanges, truly unfolded with vibrant, daily intensity. You're no longer just contemplating a single spice in isolation, but are now drifting, like a tumbleweed of pure consciousness, into the bustling, chaotic, and utterly intoxicating atmosphere of a legendary Silk Road oasis city. Imagine a place like fabled Samarkand, or perhaps Bukhara or Kashgar, names that themselves seem to hum with the resonance of distant camel bells and whispered secrets. You find yourself, in this sleepy reverie, materializing in the central market, the Registan or bazaar, at the peak of its activity. The sun is high, though its fiercest rays are perhaps filtered through colorful awnings stretched between buildings or through the latticework of covered alleyways. The first thing that strikes you, even before you can fully focus your eyes, is the sheer wall of scent. It's an olfactory assault, a joyous, bewildering symphony that your 21st century nose, accustomed to more curated environments, might initially struggle to process. It's like every spice we've discussed, and 100 more you don't yet know, have decided to throw a wild, unrestrained party. Your nose would probably demand its own little vacation afterwards, just to recover. There's our first gentle chuckle for this section. There's the sweet, warm breath of cinnamon and cassia, mingling with the sharp prickle of various peppers, black, long, and perhaps others even more exotic. You detect the earthy, almost musky depth of cumin and coriander, the bright, citrusy tang of sumac, and the rich, slightly bitter notes of turmeric, piled high in vibrant yellow mounds. Interwoven with these are the heady perfumes of flower, oils and incense resins, like frankincense and myrrh, their smoke coiling lazily in the air from nearby temples or the stalls of perfumers. Then, underpinning it all, is the scent of cooking food from 1,000 tiny kitchens and street vendors, roasting meats, baking bread, bubbling stews, each releasing its own fragrant invitation. Add to this the not unpleasant, earthy smell of raw wool, cotton, and freshly dyed silks, the faint, leathery aroma of harnesses and saddles, and, yes, the ever-present, authentically rustic fragrance of pack animals, camels, donkeys, horses, who are, after all, the unsung heroes of this entire enterprise. Once your sense of smell has somewhat recalibrated from sheer, delightful overwhelm, you begin to take in the sights. It's a kaleidoscope of humanity. Merchants from every conceivable point of the compass, stern-faced Sogdians, the legendary middlemen of the Silk Road, perhaps in their distinctive tunics and boots, turbaned Persians with keen, bargaining eyes, fair-haired Scythians from the northern steppes, possibly trading furs and amber. You see Buddhist monks in saffron robes, their faces serene amidst the chaos, perhaps journeying from India to China, carrying sacred texts. Nestorian Christians, Manichaeans, Zoroastrians, Jews, all mingling, all trading. It's like the original intergalactic cantina scene from that famous space movie, but with significantly more camels and arguably better hats. That's joke number 2, light and sleepy. The goods on display are just as varied. Bolts of shimmering Chinese silk, so fine you feel you could read a papyrus scroll through them, are piled next to rugged woolen carpets from Persia, their intricate designs telling stories in thread. There are gleaming ceramics, precious gems from the Bodakshan mines, lapis lazuli, the color of a twilight sky, lustrous pearls from the Indian Ocean, and finely wrought metalwork. You might see Roman glass, highly prized in the East, alongside paper, a Chinese invention slowly making its way westwards. A commodity that would eventually revolutionize record-keeping and knowledge dissemination. Samarkand, for instance, was famed for its high-quality paper production from the 8th century onwards, after the craft was supposedly learned from Chinese prisoners of war. There's a mainstream historical nugget for you. And the sounds? A cacophony that somehow resolves into a kind of urban music. The melodic calls of vendors hawking their wares in a dozen different languages. Sogdian, Persian, Turkic dialects, Chinese, Sanskrit, Aramaic, Greek, the sharp, percussive clang of a coppersmith's hammer, the rhythmic thwack of a weaver's loom from a nearby courtyard, the gentle strumming of a dutar, or the reedy wail of a flute played by an itinerant musician. And always, the murmur of countless conversations, the animated haggling over prices, the shared laughter, the earnest discussions. Archaeologists and historians continue to piece together the daily linguistic tapestry of such a multicultural hub, debating which tongue might have served as the dominant lingua franca in these bustling marketplaces at different periods. Was it Sogdian for a long stretch? Or did traders simply become remarkably adept polyglots out of sheer necessity? In the midst of all this sensory richness, you'd find the caravanserais, those vital courtyard inns we've touched upon, often adjoining the market. Here, weary travelers and their animals could find shelter, food, water, and a place to store their goods securely. These weren't just ancient motels. They were crucial nodes in the network, places where information was exchanged as readily as currency, news from distant lands, wars, new rulers, famines, discoveries would travel along these routes, carried in the stories and rumors shared over evening campfires or cups of spiced tea. You might hear tales of mythical beasts guarding distant mountain passes, or of legendary hidden valleys overflowing with jewels. There were no nightly news broadcasts, no instant messaging, so these shared stories, embellished with each retelling, were the lifeblood of information, connecting this sprawling, disconnected world. One slightly quirky tidbit to consider is the sheer level of specialized knowledge required to navigate this world. Beyond just the languages, merchants needed to understand complex systems of weights and measures that varied from region to region, intricate customs, regulations, and the unwritten rules of bargaining and etiquette specific to different cultures. There were no handy travel guides or TripAdvisor reviews to warn you about the slightly aggressive rug merchant down the third alley on the left, or which caravanserai had the freshest water. It was a world built on personal connections, reputation, and an astonishing amount of accumulated practical wisdom as you drift in this imagined marketplace, feeling the sun-baked warmth of the mud brick walls around you, seeing the dazzling colors, hearing the symphony of human endeavor, and breathing in that incredible, unique perfume of a world in motion. You realize that these oasis cities were far more than just trading posts. They were crucibles of culture, dynamic centers where ideas, technologies, religions, and artistic styles met, mingled, and were transformed, creating something new and vibrant before continuing their journey outwards. The spices, so precious and pungent, were just one thread in this incredibly rich, interwoven tapestry of human connection that these caravan cities so beautifully and chaotically embodied. And amidst that chaotic, vibrant tapestry of the caravan city, that bustling marketplace you were just drifting through, your attention is now drawn to a particular sack in a spice merchant's stall. It's tucked, perhaps slightly, behind the more Familiar mounds of round black pepper and fragrant cinnamon sticks, as if a little shy, or maybe just trying to be enigmatic. You perceive a subtle, almost camphorous aroma emanating from it. A distinctly peppery note, yes, but intertwined with an intriguing, slightly medicinal coolness, a hint of pine or eucalyptus. You're about to get acquainted with cubeb pepper, a spice with a curious little tale and a fascinatingly checkered past. A real character on the stage of lost and found flavors. Lean in closer in your mind's eye. What you see are small, dried berries, similar in size to black peppercorns, but each one sports a tiny, attached stalk or tail, making it look rather like a miniature medieval mace, or perhaps, as it's often called, tailed pepper. It's the pepper that, humorously speaking, forgot to fully undock from its stem before setting off on its world tour. There's a little jest for you. This unique feature makes Piper cubeba, a native of the Indonesian islands like Java and Sumatra, instantly recognizable. It's a close relative of both black pepper and long pepper, but it definitely dances to its own aromatic tune. Its flavor profile is where things get particularly interesting. When you first encounter it, there's a definite peppery bite, but it's quickly followed by a wave of aromatic complexity. It's been described as having notes of allspice, juniper, a hint of clove, and that distinctive cool, almost camphorous or eucalyptus-like finish. It's pungent, a little bitter, and remarkably aromatic all at once. A far cry from the straightforward punch of black pepper. Imagine a peppery flavor that also seems to clear your sinuses a little. That's cubeb for you. For centuries, cubeb was a highly prized spice, particularly in Arab and Indonesian cuisines, and it made significant inroads into medieval European kitchens as well. It was a star ingredient in the elaborate, heavily spiced dishes favored by the wealthy during the Middle Ages. Think rich meat stews, savory pies, and complex sauces where its unique pungency and aromatic notes could really shine. It was often found in spice blends, the medieval equivalent of a secret seasoning mix, adding its distinctive voice to the chorus. For instance, it's thought to have been an occasional component in some older versions of the famous North African spice blend Ras al Hanout, which translates to head of the shop, implying the best spices the merchant had to offer. But cubeb's story isn't just culinary. Oh no, this tailed wonder was a veritable workhorse in traditional medicine. In Arabic Unani medicine and Indian Ayurveda, it was used for a wide array of ailments. Its warming, aromatic properties made it a go-to for respiratory issues, coughs, and colds. It was also highly regarded for its effects on the urinary system. And this is where its reputation took a particularly specific turn. Here's a mainstream historical fact, handled with sleepy discretion. From the Middle Ages, right up until the advent of antibiotics in the 20th century, cubeb gained significant renown in Western medicine for its use in treating certain persistent and unwelcome internal inflammations, particularly those affecting the urinary tract. It was a key ingredient in many proprietary remedies for conditions that were, shall we say, the unfortunate souvenirs of amorous encounters in less careful times. Its use in medicine was so prominent that it even found its way into, of all things, cigarettes. For a period in the 19th and early 20th centuries, cubeb cigarettes were marketed and sold, often by rather distinguished brands, as a treatment for asthma, bronchitis, hay fever, and general throat irritations. Imagine your doctor prescribing a specific brand of smokes to clear your airways, different times, There's our second sleepy chuckle. The idea was that the volatile oils released by burning the cubeb would have a soothing, antiseptic effect. Whether they did more harm than good in that format is, of course, highly debatable from our modern perspective. The surprising uses don't stop there. There are whispers in older texts of cubeb being used to ward off demonic spirits or as an ingredient in love potions, while concrete evidence for widespread use in demon warding might be on the fanciful side. Its strong, pungent aroma certainly could have lent itself to such beliefs. It was, in many ways, the Swiss Army knife of the ancient and medieval spice rack. Flavor your food, cure your cough, manage your more delicate infections, potentially enhance your love life, and keep evil spirits at bay. What more could you ask from a humble-tailed berry? So, what happened to this incredibly versatile spice in Europe? After the 17th century, its popularity in European kitchens began to wane quite dramatically. One quirky, often cited reason involves trade politics. King Duarte of Portugal, in the 16th century, reportedly restricted the trade of cubeb pepper to promote the sale of the more abundantly available black pepper, which Portugal controlled more directly from India. Whether this edict alone was enough to torpedo cubeb's culinary career is debatable. The precise reasons for cubeb's rather dramatic fall from grace in European kitchens remain a subject of some spicy speculation among food historians. Did its strong medicinal associations eventually make it seem less appealing as a foodstuff? Did the rise of new spices and changing culinary fashions simply push it aside? Or was it a combination of trade disruptions, cost, and evolving palates? Well, it largely disappeared from European dining tables. It never truly vanished from traditional Indonesian or North African cooking. And today, cubeb is experiencing a small, intriguing renaissance. Chefs and curious cooks are rediscovering its unique aromatic profile. It's also found a niche in the world of artisanal gin, where its spicy, slightly piney notes can add a fascinating dimension. So, as you drift along, imagine that little-tailed pepper, once a king in medieval spice boxes, then a somewhat forgotten remedy, now tentatively peeking back into the limelight. It's a spicy reminder that flavors, like fortunes, can ebb and flow, and that even the most intriguing characters can sometimes get a second act. And speaking of flavors ebbing and flowing, and sometimes performing remarkable geographical leaps, let your focus now drift away from the Indonesian archipelago, leaving behind the camphorous intrigue of cubeb pepper and the more familiar Silk Road paths. You're venturing south, far south, carried on warm, sleepy breezes towards the vibrant, historically rich coastline of West Africa. This is a region that, for centuries, offered Europe a uniquely pungent and rather poetically named treasure of its own, a spice that truly lived up to its evocative branding: grains of paradise. Imagine yourself stepping onto the shores of what European traders would later dub the Pepper Coast, or, more specifically, the Grain Coast, stretching across parts of modern-day Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea. The air here is humid, thick with the scent of lush vegetation, damp earth, and the nearby ocean. Growing in the tropical undergrowth, you'd find a rather unassuming herbaceous perennial plant, Aphromomum meligota. It's a member of the ginger family, boasting striking trumpet-shaped purple flowers that give way to reddish-brown pods. Inside these pods, nestled in a pulpy flesh, are the real prize: scores of small, angular, reddish-brown seeds. These are the grains of paradise. The name itself sounds like something you'd find in a mythical hero's snack pack, doesn't it? A little poetic jest to start us off. Now, let's talk about their flavor, because that's what captivated palates for centuries. If you were to crunch one of these tiny seeds, you'd first get a sharp, peppery heat, not unlike black pepper, but then a whole chorus of other notes would join in. There's a distinct cardamom-like aroma, hints of ginger as befits its family, a touch of clove, perhaps coriander, and even subtle floral or citrusy whispers. It's a complex, warming, and deeply aromatic experience, a sort of all-in-one spice blend provided by nature. These potent little seeds began making their way northwards across the vast Sahara Desert through ancient caravan routes. Long before European ships first nosed their way along the West African coast, they were a valuable commodity in North African and Arab trade, and from there they trickled into Europe, likely through Italy and Spain. By the 13th century, possibly even earlier, their popularity soared during the Middle Ages and into the Renaissance. For a time, grains of paradise were a serious rival to black pepper in European kitchens. They were often cheaper than Asian black pepper, which had to travel much farther and through many more hands, but they were also valued for their own unique, complex flavor profile. When Portuguese explorers reached the West African coast in the 15th century, they were thrilled to find a direct source for this valuable spice. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The coast was quite literally named the Grain Coast by these Portuguese traders precisely because of the abundance of Aframamama Melagata grain being a common term for any pepper-like spice at the time. They quickly established a thriving trade, shipping grains of paradise back to Europe in significant quantities. You can imagine medieval and Renaissance cooks eagerly incorporating these grains into their dishes. They were used to season meats, stews, and sausages, much like black pepper. But their aromatic complexity also made them a favorite for flavoring beverages. They were a popular addition to wine, ale, and beer, used to add warmth, spice, and a perceived zestiness, especially to drinks that might have been a tad on the bland or slightly offside. Think of it as the original craft beer movement, medieval style, now with extra grains of paradise for that heavenly kick. There's our second chuckle. They were also a key ingredient in gingerbread and other spiced cakes and biscuits, where their aromatic notes could truly sing. Beyond the kitchen, grains of paradise, like so many other exotic spices, were attributed with various medicinal properties in both traditional West African practice and later in European herbals. They were often used as a warming stimulant, a digestive aid, and to treat coughs and colds. Their very name, grains of paradise, hints at an almost mystical origin. Some medieval writers, with a characteristic blend of geographical confusion and romantic imagination, even speculated that these grains truly originated in the earthly paradise, the Garden of Eden, which was often believed to lie somewhere in the distant, unknown east or south, in this case. This fantastical association certainly wouldn't have harmed their market appeal. A quirky little tidbit: in some parts of West Africa, the plant itself is not just valued for its seeds. The leaves are used for wrapping food, and some sources even mention that elephants are rather fond of munching on the plant, perhaps enjoying their own version of a spicy treat. Imagine an elephant with a taste for paradise grains, quite the discerning palate. So, what happened to this once celebrated spice? Why did grains of paradise, after dramatically flavoring European tables for centuries, largely fade into relative obscurity in Western cooking, much like long pepper? The precise balance of factors that led to grains of paradise losing their prominent place on European spice racks is still something food historians chew over. the rise of more intensive cultivation of black pepper, and later, the arrival of chili peppers from the New World, offered hotter and sometimes cheaper alternatives, changing culinary fashions, which saw a decline in the heavily spiced dishes of the medieval era in favor of more subtly flavored French-influenced cuisine, also played a significant role. Trade routes shifted, colonial priorities changed, and slowly, grains of paradise became another member of the used-to-be famous club of spices in the European context. And that's our third sleepy jest. However, much like cubeb pepper, grains of paradise never disappeared from their regions of origin. They remain an important ingredient in West and North African cooking today, valued for their unique aromatic complexity. And, also like cubeb, they are experiencing a small but enthusiastic revival in the West among adventurous chefs, brewers, and distillers who are drawn to their historical significance and their wonderfully layered flavor. As you continue to drift, imagine the warm, pungent, slightly floral scent of these tiny seeds, a true taste of an African paradise that once took European tables by storm. A whisper from the Grain Coast inviting you to remember its flavorful tale. As the peppery, floral notes of grains of paradise gently fade from your senses, your awareness drifts upwards, climbing high into the rarefied, crystal-clear air of majestic mountain ranges. You're leaving the tropical coastlines and the dusty, spice-laden markets far below, journeying now towards the very roof of the world, the soaring Himalayas, in search of a plant whose essence was considered profoundly sacred across ancient cultures, its aroma believed to be a fragrant bridge between the earthly and the divine. You are seeking spikenard, a name that itself seems to whisper of ancient rituals and precious ointments. Imagine yourself now amidst the breathtaking, rugged beauty of the high alpine slopes of Nepal, Bhutan, India, or China. Here, clinging to life in the thin soil at altitudes often ranging from 3,000 to 5,000 meters. That's roughly 10,000 to 16,000 feet. For those of us metrically challenged, you'd find Nardostiches, Jatamansi. This isn't a towering tree or a robust bush. Spikenard is a small, rather unassuming flowering plant, a member of the honeysuckle family, which seems surprising given its earthy scent profile. It has delicate, bell-shaped, pinkish or pale blue flowers, but the true treasure, the source of its legendary fragrance, lies hidden beneath the soil in its rhizomes. Its aromatic, densely hairy, reddish-brown roots. This plant really believed in getting away from it all, didn't it? There's a gentle jest for your mountain ascent. It's from these humble-looking, fuzzy roots that one of the ancient world's most precious and potent aromatic oils was painstakingly extracted. Sacred essence of spikenard is undeniable. Its history is deeply interwoven with perfume, incense, and religious ceremony. For millennia, it was a cornerstone of perfumery in ancient Egypt, Rome, Greece, and the Middle East. Its aroma is complex and not to everyone's immediate liking, especially in its concentrated form. It's intensely earthy, musky, woody, and warm, with a certain sweetness, but also a distinctive note that some compared to valerian, a botanical relative, which might explain some of its calming associations. It's powerful, distinctive, and incredibly tenacious, the kind of perfume that announces its presence long before you enter a room and lingers like a fond memory. Or perhaps like a guest who slightly overstays their welcome but you're too polite to say anything. That's our second sleepy chuckle. In a world without modern chemical fixatives, spikenard oil, often referred to simply as nard, was highly valued for its ability to anchor more volatile floral scents and for its own profound fragrance. It was a key ingredient in unguentum nardinum, a famous and very costly Roman perfume and anointing oil. You can picture wealthy Roman matrons, or even emperors, dabbing this precious oil on their wrists or hair, cocooned in an aura of exotic, earthy richness. Its expense meant it was a true luxury item. You certainly wouldn't be using it to freshen up your gym socks, that's for sure. Its use as a sacred incense is equally ancient and widespread across various spiritual traditions. The burning of spikenard was believed to purify spaces, aid in meditation, and carry prayers to the heavens on its aromatic smoke. Its most famous literary and religious association and our mainstream historical fact for this section is undoubtedly its mention in the Bible. In the New Testament, Mary, the sister of Lazarus, anoints Jesus' feet with a pound of very costly ointment of spikenard, the fragrance of which filled the whole house. This act of profound devotion and honor underscores the immense value and sacred connotations of spikenard in that era. A pound of it would have represented an extraordinary sum, perhaps a year's wages for a common laborer, while its fame rests primarily on its aromatic and spiritual applications. Spikenard did have its moments as a unique condiment and medicine in ancient Roman cuisine and occasionally in medieval European dishes. A touch of spikenard might have been used to impart its unusual flavor to spiced wines or certain rich savory dishes, though it was far less common in the kitchen than spices, like pepper or cloves. Its strong taste meant it had to be used with a very light hand. In traditional Ayurvedic medicine, where it is known as jatamansi, spikenard has been used for centuries for its calming properties, to promote sleep, relieve stress and anxiety, and to treat various neurological and digestive issues. Its very name, jatamansi, in Sanskrit refers to its matted, hairy roots, resembling the dreadlocks of an ascetic. The journey of spikenard from the high Himalayas to the dressing tables and altars of the West was, as you can imagine, long and arduous. Harvested from its wild high-altitude habitat, the roots would be carefully dried and then transported down treacherous mountain paths on the backs of yaks or porters to the plains of India. From there, it would join the bustling trade routes, moving westward via land and sea, passing through numerous intermediaries, its value increasing with every mile. Botanists and historians still discuss the precise botanical identities of all substances referred to as nard in ancient texts, though Nardostiches jatamansi is widely accepted as the primary source of true high-quality spikenard. It's possible that other aromatic roots were sometimes passed off as, or confused with, true nard, especially given its high price. A quirky little tidbit about spikenard is its reputation in some ancient cultures for promoting tranquility and mental clarity. Beyond its general use as a calming agent in Ayurveda, some traditions held that simply inhaling its fragrance could help focus the mind for meditation or prepare one for spiritual contemplation. It wasn't just about smelling good, it was about feeling a certain way, achieving a particular state of being. Imagine a scholar or a monk in a quiet, lamplit room, a tiny amount of spikenard smoldering nearby, its earthy, musky scent grounding them in their studies or their devotion. As you let your mind rest in these high, serene altitudes, enveloped by the imagined, deeply resonant fragrance of spikenard, you can appreciate how this small, unassuming plant, through its powerful, aromatic roots, touched the spiritual, medicinal, and luxurious sensibilities of ancient civilizations. It's a scent that speaks of devotion, of immense journeys, and of a connection to something ancient and profound, a sacred essence coaxed from the very roof of the world, offering a unique kind of peace to those who sought its fragrant company. From the serene, sacred heights where spikenard whispers its ancient, earthy secrets, you now gently descend, your awareness drifting back towards more arid plains and sun-baked rugged mountains. But prepare yourself, because the next aroma to greet your senses is anything but subtle, and its most common historical nickname is decidedly far from sacred. In fact, it's rather diabolical, though delightfully so in its own unique way. You're about to confront the culinary paradox that is asafoetida, a substance often called, with a certain dramatic flair, devil's dung. Yes, you heard that right. Devil's dung, or stinking gum, are just two of the rather uncharitable, though admittedly memorable, monikers bestowed upon the dried latex, or resin, obtained from the taproot and rhizome of several species of Frillia, a genus of herbaceous plants related to the carrot and fennel family. Imagine a sturdy, perennial plant, Frillia asafoetida, being the most common source, thriving in the arid deserts of Iran and the mountainous terrain of Afghanistan and neighboring regions. To get the resin, a deep incision is made at the top of the root of a mature plant, and as the milky latex oozes out, it's allowed to dry, forming a pungent, gummy mass. And pungent, my friends, is putting it mildly. The raw smell of asafoetida is legendary for its intensity. It's a potent, sulfurous aroma, often described as a concentrated essence of garlic and onions, but amplified to an almost aggressive degree, with an added acrid note that can be quite overpowering if you're not expecting it. It's the kind of smell that doesn't just enter a room. It announces its presence with a megaphone and possibly a small, very loud brass band. There's your first sleepy jest. This formidable fragrance is precisely why it earned its less than flattering nicknames. You can almost picture ancient traders, noses wrinkled, carefully wrapping their blocks of asafoetida in multiple layers of cloth, hoping to contain its olfactory enthusiasm. But here lies the magic, the surprising, almost alchemical transformation that makes asafoetida a beloved ingredient in many cuisines. When a tiny pinch of this resin, usually sold as a lump or a fine yellow powder, often diluted with rice flour or fenugreek to tame its strength, is heated in hot oil or ghee, something extraordinary happens. That harsh, almost offensive odor mellows, softens, and miraculously transmutes into a smooth, savory, deeply umami flavor, reminiscent of cooked leeks, shallots, or garlic, but with its own unique, warm undertones. It's like the ugly duckling of the spice world. If the duckling initially smelled like a forgotten gym sock left in a sulfur spring, but then, with a little heat and kindness, turned into a swan that could cook like a Michelin-starred chef. That's chuckle number 2. This transformative quality is why asafoetida, often known as hing in India, has been a culinary staple for centuries, particularly in Indian vegetarian cooking. Many Hindu Brahmins and followers of Jainism traditionally avoid garlic and onions, and asafoetida provides a perfect way to impart that desirable, savory depth and allium-like flavor to lentil dishes, dals, vegetable curries, pickles, and savory snacks. There's a mainstream historical fact for you. Its widespread adoption in specific Indian culinary traditions as an onion-garlic substitute. It adds a certain je ne sais quoi, an almost meaty richness, without any actual meat, garlic, or onion involved. Its journey into the culinary world stretches far back. Asafoetida was known to the ancient Romans, who may have encountered it following Alexander the Great's campaigns in Persia and Central Asia. There's a rather charming, if perhaps apocryphal, quirky tidbit that Alexander's troops, upon discovering asafoetida in the Hindu Kush mountains, initially mistook it for the long-lost and highly coveted Silphium, which also came from a species of perilla. Imagine their excitement, thinking they'd rediscovered that legendary spice, only to find its far more pungent, and some might say, more challenging cousin. As Silphium became increasingly scarce and eventually vanished, asafoetida did indeed step in as a substitute in some Roman kitchens, though its flavor profile was decidedly different and more robust. Culinary historians sometimes ponder whether the asafoetida that reached Roman kitchens truly offered a comparable sensory experience to the lost Silphium, or if it was more of a close enough in a pinch understudy, perhaps like recasting a beloved, subtle movie star with their much louder, smellier, but surprisingly versatile character actor cousin. And that's our third jest. Beyond its culinary uses, asafoetida, like many strongly scented substances in the ancient world, had a prominent place in traditional medicine. It was widely employed as a digestive aid, particularly to prevent flatulence, a rather useful property when consuming large quantities of legumes, and to treat irritable bowel syndrome. Its antispasmodic properties also led to its use for respiratory conditions like asthma, bronchitis, and whooping cough. And, perhaps unsurprisingly, given its potent aroma, it was also believed to ward off illness and even evil spirits. In some cultures, small pieces of the resin were worn in amulets around the neck to protect against infection, a sort of fragrant force field against unseen malevolence. The devil's dung moniker, while attention-grabbing, really only tells half the story. It speaks to the initial shock of its raw aroma, but it completely misses the sophisticated, savory magic it conjures in the cooking pot. Learning to appreciate asafoetida is a bit like learning to appreciate a particularly strong cheese or a complex fermented food. There's an initial barrier, perhaps, but once you understand its transformative power and the depth it can bring, it becomes an indispensable secret weapon in the kitchen's soul. As you continue your sleepy drift, let the initial, challenging whiff of raw asafoetida give way in your mind to the warm, comforting, savory aroma that emerges when it meets the heat of a pan. It's a testament to culinary alchemy, a reminder that sometimes the most unpromising beginnings can lead to the most wonderfully surprising and delicious transformations. A true Beauty and the Beast story from the fascinating world of spices. Leaving behind the dramatic olfactory transformations of asafoetida, the devil's dung turned culinary delight, let your senses now awaken to a brighter, cleaner, altogether more zesty fragrance. You're shifting your focus from the arid lands of Persia and Afghanistan to the humid, tropical climes of Southeast Asia, specifically regions like Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and southern China. This is the vibrant homeland of another remarkable rhizome that carved its own distinctive path along ancient trade routes, bringing its unique warmth and character to distant medieval kitchens. The wonderfully aromatic galangal. Picture a plant that looks, at first glance, quite similar to its more famous cousin, ginger. It has lush, green, lance-shaped leaves and can grow quite tall, with beautiful, orchid-like flowers. But delve beneath the soil to the rhizome, the part we're interested in, and you'll start to notice the differences. There are several species referred to as galangal, but the two most historically significant in trade are greater galangal Alpinia, galanga, and lesser galangal, Alpinia. Their skin is often smoother and paler, or sometimes more reddish-brown than gingers, and the flesh inside is much harder, denser, and typically a creamy white or pale yellow. You can almost feel its woody toughness just by looking at it. This is not a rhizome that yields easily to a grater, but the real distinction lies in its aroma and flavor. While ginger offers that familiar, warm, sweet spiciness, galangal steps onto your palate with a bolder, more assertive personality. It's decidedly sharper, more peppery, with distinct piney, almost camphorous notes, a bright citrusy zest, and a subtly earthy, aromatic undertone. It's less about gentle warmth and more about a clean, invigorating zing. Some describe its scent as being like pepper and pine needles, which is surprisingly accurate. It's like ginger's more flamboyant and slightly more intense cousin, the one who perhaps studied abroad in a pine forest and came back with a bit of an attitude and a sophistication, slightly resinous accent. There's a gentle jest for you. This zesty path of galangal to the west began in antiquity, likely traveling with Arab traders who had well-established maritime links with Southeast Asia and China. It made its way through India, into the Middle East, and eventually, by the early Middle Ages, it had become a prized and surprisingly common spice in European kitchens. Long before ginger became the dominant rhizome in European cooking, galangal, often referred to as galangal in older texts, held a significant place. You'd find it flavoring both savory and sweet dishes in medieval England, France, Germany, and beyond. Imagine a bustling medieval kitchen, the air thick with wood smoke and the aroma of roasting meats. The cook, perhaps a rather stout figure, in a flour-dusted apron, reaches for a piece of dried galangal root. It would have been pounded in a mortar, its tough fibers slowly yielding their potent fragrance before being added to rich meat stews, game pies, or fish sauces, lending its distinctive peppery, aromatic warmth. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Galangal was a key ingredient in many medieval European spiced wine concoctions, such as hippocras, a popular drink where wine was sweetened and heavily spiced with a blend that often included cinnamon, ginger, cloves, and, crucially, galangal. Its sharp, clean notes would have cut through the sweetness and added a sophisticated complexity. Its use wasn't limited to savory dishes or spiced wines. Galangal also found its way into sweet preparations like fruit compotes, gingerbread-like cakes, and various confections, where its unique zest could balance the sweetness and add an exotic touch. Food historians and botanists occasionally discuss the exact nuances of what medieval Europeans specifically meant by galangal, given the various related rhizomes that traveled the trade routes, while Alpinia galinga, greater galangal, and Alpinia afasonorum, lesser galangal, which is more pungent, are the prime candidates. It's possible that other similar tasting roots were sometimes included under this general term, depending on availability and regional trade patterns. Beyond its culinary contributions, galangal has a long and respected history in traditional medicine, particularly in Southeast Asia and in Ayurveda. In Indonesian, jamu or Thai traditional healing, it's valued for its anti-inflammatory properties, as a digestive aid to settle upset stomachs, to relieve nausea, and as a warming remedy for colds and respiratory ailments. Its stimulating properties also led to its reputation as an aphrodisiac in some cultures. One of galangal's most notable European champions was the remarkable 12th century German abbess, mystic, composer, and herbalist, Hildegard von Bingen. This is a lovely, quirky tidbit for you. Hildegard held galangal in extremely high esteem, referring to it in her medical writings as the spice of life. She recommended it for a wide range of ailments, from indigestion and loss of appetite to heart pain and even bad breath. She believed it possessed powerful warming and invigorating properties. If a visionary, saintly abbess, who also composed ethereal music, calls something the spice of life, you'd probably feel quite good about grating it into your soup or steeping it in your wine, wouldn't you? That's chuckle number 2 for your sleepy contemplation. So why did galangal, once so prominent in European medieval kitchens, gradually fade from common use in the West? Much like long pepper and grains of paradise, while ginger rose to become the go-to rhizome, the reasons are likely complex, involving shifts in trade routes, the increasing availability and perhaps lower cost of ginger, and evolving culinary tastes that may have favored ginger's sweeter, less aggressive profile. As European cuisine moved away from the heavily spiced medieval style, some of these more assertive flavors were perhaps left behind. However, galangal never lost its importance in the cuisines of its native Southeast Asia. It remains an indispensable ingredient in Thai, Indonesian, Malaysian, Vietnamese, and Cambodian cooking, fundamental to iconic dishes like tom yum soup, rendang, and countless curries and spice pastes. Its clean, sharp, aromatic heat is simply irreplaceable in these culinary traditions. It has that kind of warmth that doesn't just heat you up. It gives your taste buds a friendly, invigorating nudge, a wake-up call to an entirely different spectrum of flavor. And there's our third gentle jest. Today, with the growing global interest in Southeast Asian cuisines, galangal is once again becoming more widely available and appreciated in the West. Adventurous cooks are rediscovering its unique, zesty character, realizing that it's not just another type of ginger, but a distinct and vibrant personality in the vast, flavorful world of spices. As you drift along, imagine that bright, piney, citrusy aroma, a clean, invigorating scent that once traveled thousands of miles to awaken and delight medieval palates. A true spice of life indeed. From the zesty, invigorating warmth of galangal, that Southeast Asian spice of life, let your senses now travel gently westward, carried on a soft Mediterranean breeze, back towards the sun-drenched shores and rocky hillsides of the Aegean Sea. You find your attention drawn not to a root or a seed this time, nor to a bark or a berry, but to the glistening, translucent tears wept by a very special, somewhat unassuming tree. These droplets, hardening in the warm air, carry a unique, resinous fragrance that has been cherished, chewed and cooked with for millennia. You're about to discover the singular charm of masti. Picture the Greek island of Chios, particularly its southern region, known as the Masticocoria or mastic villages. Here, the landscape is dotted with groves of the mastic tree, Pistacia lentiscus barcia. It's an evergreen shrub or small tree, rather hardy and unassuming for much of the year. But from late spring into summer, something remarkable happens. Skilled cultivators make small, careful incisions in the bark of the trunk and main branches. From these shallow wounds, the tree slowly exudes its precious resin, a sticky, aromatic sap that drips down in small droplets like translucent, pale yellow tears. These tears of Chios, as they are poetically known, dry and harden in the sun, forming brittle, pebble-like pieces of raw mastic. Its aroma and flavor are unlike any other spice you've encountered on our journey so far. When you first crush a mastic tear or warm it gently, It releases a wonderfully fresh, slightly piney or cedary fragrance. There's a hint of balsamic woodiness, perhaps a whisper of vanilla or even a faint licorice note for some. When chewed, the brittle tear softens in the warmth of your mouth, becoming a pliable, chewy gum. The taste is initially a little bitter, but this quickly gives way to a refreshing, cleansing, subtly woody flavor that is uniquely its own. It's the original breath mint, really, before tiny tins and aggressive marketing campaigns took over. The oral hygiene scene. There's a gentle jest for you. Mastic has indeed been chewed for millennia, primarily for its pleasant taste and its reputed benefits for dental health. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Ancient Greeks, including the physician Hippocrates, recognized its properties for cleaning teeth and freshening breath as far back as the 5th century. BCE, Roman ladies often chewed mastic to perfume their breath, and it was a common practice throughout the Byzantine and Ottoman empires. It wasn't just about masking odors. The resin has natural antibacterial properties that likely did contribute to better oral hygiene. But mastic's talents extend far beyond being an ancient form of chewing gum. Its unique aromatic profile has made it a cherished ingredient in Mediterranean and Middle Eastern cuisines for centuries. In Greek cooking, it's a key flavoring in siraki, a traditional sweet Easter bread, and in various biscuits and pastries. It lends its characteristic fragrance to a famous Greek liqueur called mastika or masticato, a sweet, aromatic spirit often enjoyed as a date stuff. You might also find it in lakumi, often known as Turkish delight, where it imparts a subtle, resinous counterpoint to the sweetness, and for a truly unique experience. There's mastic-flavored ice cream, which might sound a bit like chewing on a very fancy, very clean pine tree, but in a surprisingly good, refreshing way. That's chuckle number 2. It's even used in some savory dishes, particularly in parts of the Middle East, to flavor cheeses or in spice blends for meats, though its culinary use remains more prominent in sweets and drinks. The harvesting of mastic, known as kentos, is a meticulous, labor-intensive process that has remained largely unchanged for centuries. The ground beneath the trees is cleared and often dusted with white clay so the precious tears can be easily seen, and collected once they fall or are gently scraped from the bark. It's a communal affair in the mastic villages, steeped in tradition. These villages themselves are architecturally unique, often built like fortresses with high walls and labyrinthian streets. A design intended to protect the valuable mastic crop and its trade from pirates and invaders during Genoese and Ottoman rule. This is a fascinating, quirky tidbit. During the Ottoman period, mastic from Chios was incredibly valuable, sometimes literally worth its weight in gold, and the Sultan's harem was said to be a major consumer. Stealing mastic could result in severe punishment, underscoring its immense economic importance to the island. One of the most intriguing aspects of mastic is its almost exclusive production in the southern part of Chios. Although the Pistachia lentiscus tree grows in other Mediterranean countries, it's only on this specific Aegean island, and predominantly in its southern villages, that the trees reliably weep this particular high-quality, aromatic resin in commercial quantities. Botanists and agronomists still explore the precise combination of microclimate, the specific soil composition, the sea breezes, the amount of sunshine, and perhaps even unique genetic traits of the Chion mastic tree that makes this small corner of the world its almost exclusive commercial producer. Talk about playing hard to get. This tree really knows its unique worth and its ideal, very specific real estate. And that's our third sleepy jest for this section. This geographical specificity has, of course, contributed to its mystique and its historical value. Beyond chewing and cooking, mastic resin has also been used in traditional medicine for digestive ailments like stomach ulcers and indigestion. And its anti-inflammatory properties have been utilized for skin irritations and wound healing. Its fine, clear resin was also historically important as a high-quality varnish for protecting oil paintings, prized for its clarity and resistance to yellowing. And while not as common as frankincense or myrrh, it has also seen some use as incense. Its clean, slightly sharp aroma considered purifying. The exact moment mastic transitioned from a simple, wild-harvested chew to a cultivated, internationally traded commodity is, like many such ancient developments, lost to the mists of time. However, its enduring presence in the culture and economy of Chios, and its unique sensory fingerprint on the cuisines and customs of the wider Mediterranean, speaks to the timeless appeal of these crystal tears. As you continue to drift, imagine the cool, smooth feel of a mastic tear between your fingers. The release of that fresh, piney scent as it warms, a tiny, glistening droplet holding centuries of sunshine, tradition, and unique Mediterranean flavor. As the clean, resinous scent of mastic gently dissolves into the backdrop of your sleepy awareness, you sense a shift, a broadening of perspective. We're drawing together the threads of all these exotic aromas we've encountered on our journey. The fiery punch of black pepper, the complex warmth of long pepper, the sweet embrace of cinnamon, the camphorous coolness of cubeb, the zesty kick of galangal, the paradisiacal promise of those West African grains, and even the pungent surprise of asafoetida. We're here to appreciate the grand culinary stage upon which they all performed with such dramatic flair. The ancient and perhaps even more flamboyantly, the medieval European kitchen. It's here that you'll truly see how these imported treasures performed a kind of delicious alchemy, revolutionizing diets and adding a dazzling, almost theatrical, and certainly unexpected complexity to the food of centuries past. Imagine, for a moment, the European diet before these spices became widely available, at least to those who could afford them. While local herbs certainly played their part, the overall flavor palette, especially for preserved meats and winter fare, could be, well, let's just say a little on the monotonous side. Think of heavily salted meats intended to last through long winters, or endless variations on potages made with whatever grains and vegetables were on hand. Now, introduce the vibrant, assertive personalities of these eastern spices. Suddenly, that salted beef isn't just salty. It's humming with the warmth of cloves, the bite of pepper, the sweet perfume of cinnamon. That simple grain pottage transforms into something far more intriguing with a pinch of grains of paradise or a whisper of mace. It was a genuine revolution. For the taste buds in the medieval kitchen, particularly in the grand households of nobles and wealthy merchants, spices weren't just flavor they were a language. They spoke of wealth, status, and a connection to the exotic, far-off lands from whence they came. To be able to serve dishes laden with expensive imported spices was the ultimate display of affluence and sophistication. Subtlety, as we might understand it today, was often left at the kitchen door, along with the mud from your boots and perhaps your less than aristocratic table manners. There's a gentle jest for you. The more spices, and the more exotic their combination, the more impressive the feast. Here's your mainstream historical fact for this section. Medieval cookbooks, such as the French La Viandia, attributed to Chef to French kings in the 14th century, or the English, the form of curie from the court of Richard II, are filled with recipes that call for a dazzling array of spices. These weren't just optional suggestions. They were integral to the dishes. You'd find pepper, cloves, nutmeg, mace, cinnamon, ginger, galangal, cardamom, and saffron used with what seems to us like wild abandon, often in combinations that might strike a modern palate as unusual, blending sweet and savory, hot and aromatic, all in one dish. Take, for example, the spiced wines that were so popular, drinks like hippocras or claret. These were red or white wines, often sweetened with honey or sugar, another expensive import, and then infused with a potent mixture of cinnamon, ginger, cloves, galangal, long pepper, grains of paradise, and sometimes even spikenard or cubeb. They were served warm, a comforting and highly aromatic beverage that was both a luxury and, according to the medical theories of the time, probably quite good for your digestion and overall humoral balance. R. Humoral theory. We can't talk about medieval food without touching on this. The prevailing medical belief, inherited from ancient Greek physicians like Galen, was that the human body was governed by 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow, bile, and black bile, each associated with qualities of hot, cold, moist, and dry. Foodstuffs too were categorized by these qualities. Spices, being mostly hot and dry, were seen as essential for balancing cold or moist ingredients, like fish or certain vegetables. So, if you were eating a cold cucumber, you'd better load it up with hot pepper to avoid an imbalance in your system and possibly prevent an existential crisis about your bodily fluids. That's chuckle number 2 for your sleepy contemplation. This belief system profoundly influenced how spices were used, not just for flavor, but for perceived health benefits. The alchemy in these medieval kitchens was truly remarkable. Cooks, often with limited equipment by our standards, were tasked with transforming sometimes basic ingredients into spectacular centerpieces for the feasting table. Spices were their magical powders, their elixirs. They didn't just add taste, they added color. Saffron, for instance, was prized for the golden yellow hue it imparted to rice dishes, sauces, and even baked goods, symbolizing wealth. Brightly colored powders or dishes made with sandalwood for red or parsley for green were all part of the visual spectacle. A quirky tidbit for you. It wasn't uncommon for nobles to have their roasted swan or peacock redressed in its feathers. After cooking, its beak and sometimes even its neck gilded with gold leaf or colored with saffron, making it a stunning, if perhaps slightly inedible looking, showpiece. Good luck trying to recreate that for your next dinner party. Culinary historians continue to explore the primary motivations behind this lavish use of spices in medieval elite kitchens. Was it truly for sophisticated flavor development, a deep appreciation of complex aromatic profiles? Was it predominantly a conspicuous display of wealth, a way to outspice your feudal rivals? Or was it, as has often been popularly suggested, a practical necessity to mask the taste of poorly preserved or slightly tainted food? While the masking tainted food theory has been largely downplayed by modern historians, arguing that those wealthy enough to afford spices could also afford fresher ingredients, it probably played some role some of the time. However, the sheer complexity and deliberate combination of spices in recipes suggest a genuine appreciation for their sensory impact, far beyond just covering up an off taste. These exotic imports allowed for an explosion of flavor possibilities. Imagine the sweet-savory combinations: meat dishes cooked with fruit and heavily spiced with cinnamon, cloves, and pepper. Think of the intricate spice blends The powders, deuces sweet powders, and powders fortes, strong powders that cooks would prepare and use as their signature seasoning mixes. It was a world away from a simple sprinkle of salt and pepper. It was a deliberate, artful, and often breathtakingly expensive layering of fragrances and tastes designed to impress, to delight, and to transport the diner, metaphorically at least, to the wondrous faraway lands from which these precious specks of flavor originated. This was truly food as theater, food as status, and food as an adventure for the senses. But, as with all grand theaters and epic adventures, the scene eventually begins to shift. The actors change, new stages are built, and some of the once brightest stars, those that dazzled so brilliantly, begin to slowly fade from the limelight. As you drift from the richly spiced, almost overwhelmingly fragrant banquet halls of medieval Europe, where spices were piled on with glorious abandon, you begin to sense a change on the global winds. New sea breezes are picking up, salty and strong, promising different routes, different powers, and ultimately, a different looking and smelling spice rack for the Western world. The age of new spice highways is dawning. For centuries, the flow of spices from Asia and Africa into Europe had been largely controlled by a complex network of Arab, Persian, Indian, and Venetian merchants, among others. The fabled Silk Road, overland, and the maritime routes through the Red Sea and Persian Gulf were the arteries through which this precious, pungent cargo pulsed. This made cities like Venice and Genoa incredibly wealthy, as they held a near monopoly on the European end of this trade. But out on the Atlantic coast of Europe, nations like Portugal and Spain, and later the Dutch and the English, began to look for ways to cut out the middlemen, to find their own direct path to the source of these riches. It's not like India or the Spice Islands were hiding. It just took a rather long and very determined effort to find the direct sea-mail address, so to speak. There's a gentle jest for your historical seat, fur ing, closing parenthesis, the breakthrough, as you well know, came at the end of the 15th century, and here's your mainstream historical fact. In 1498, the Portuguese navigator, Vasco da Gama, successfully rounded the Cape of Good Hope and sailed all the way to India, establishing a direct sea route from Europe to the spice-producing East. This voyage was nothing short of revolutionary. It was as if a secret back door to the world's greatest treasure chest had suddenly been flung open. Suddenly, ships could, in theory, bypass the old routes, circumventing the taxes, tolls, and markups imposed by the various empires and city-states that controlled the overland and traditional sea passages. This didn't mean spices instantly became cheap and plentiful for everyone in Europe, far from it. They remained luxury goods for a long time, but it did mean a fundamental shift in power. The Portuguese, initially, and then the Dutch, English, and French, began to establish their own trading posts, forts, and eventually colonial empires. In Asia, the control of the spice trade gradually shifted from the Mediterranean powers to these Atlantic European nations. This new era was fiercely competitive, often brutally so. The quest to control spice-producing islands, like the Banda Islands in Indonesia, the only source of nutmeg and mace at the time, led to intense rivalries, trade wars, and acts of violence that are a darker, more sobering side to the fragrant history of spices. The original hostile takeovers in the spice business often involved actual cannons and very pointy swords, not just strongly worded emails from the legal department. That's our second, slightly darker, sleepy chuckle. With these new sea routes came changes in the availability and relative cost of certain spices. Black pepper, for instance, became even more accessible to Europeans through these direct maritime channels. But what of some of the other spices we've met on our journey? Those that once graced medieval tables with such distinction. This is where we see some of those fading flavors. Long pepper, for example, which had often been more prized than black pepper in Roman and early medieval times, began a slow decline in European popularity. Grains of paradise from West Africa, once a significant competitor to black pepper, also saw its European market share dwindle. Cubeb pepper, with its unique tailed appearance and camphorous notes, largely vanished from European recipe books. After the 17th century, even galangal, Hildegard von Bingen's spice of life, was increasingly overshadowed by its cousin, ginger, in Western kitchens. Why did these particular spices fade from European favor? The exact interplay of factors, economic shifts, evolving palates, colonial strategies, and the introduction of New World competitors in the fading of once beloved Silk Road spices from European tables is still a rich area for historical discussion. It wasn't usually a single cause, but a confluence of currents. Sometimes, the newly dominant colonial powers deliberately promoted the spices from regions they controlled directly at the expense of others. For instance, the Portuguese push for black pepper from India might have disadvantaged long pepper. Then there was the arrival of entirely new flavoring agents from the Americas, thanks to the Columbian exchange. Chili peppers, for example, offered a new kind of intense, uncomplicated heat that quickly found favor around the world, sometimes supplanting the more complex spiciness of older peppers. Vanilla, from Mexican orchids, offered a completely new, aromatic sweetness. Allspice, from the Caribbean, seemed to combine the flavors of cloves, nutmeg, and cinnamon all in one berry. These newcomers offered exciting alternatives and sometimes proved easier or cheaper to cultivate and transport. Through the new colonial networks and, crucially, European tastes themselves began to change. The heavily spiced sweet sour, intensely aromatic cuisine of the Middle Ages gradually gave way, particularly in influential French culinary circles from the 17th century onwards, to a new emphasis on the natural flavors of ingredients. Sauces became more refined, relying on butter, creams, and meat reductions, with herbs often preferred over a barrage of exotic spices. One generation's dazzling complexity can, after all, become the next generation's grandma. Why on earth did you put everything from the spice cabinet into the soup again? There's your third sleepy jest. This doesn't mean spices disappeared entirely, of course, but their role often became more subtle, more specific, rather than the all-encompassing fragrant cloud they created in medieval feasts. So, the old Silk Road, while still important for many other goods and cultural exchanges, slowly saw its role as the primary conduit for spices to the West diminish. The new maritime spice highways not only changed which spices reached European tables, but also reshaped global economies, built colonial empires, and forever altered the culinary landscapes of both East and West. The fading of some flavors was not necessarily an ending, but a transformation, a testament to the ever-shifting tides of trade, taste, and history that continue to shape what you find on your plate and in your dreams. And as those historical tides, with their currents of trade, conquest, and shifting tastes, settle into the calm, deep ocean of your deepening drowsiness, you can now begin to perceive the subtle yet persistent echoes of these ancient, sometimes seemingly lost flavors in our contemporary world. For even though some spices may have faded from the main stage of mainstream Western cuisine centuries ago, their ghosts, and often their very real, tangible presence, continue to whisper to us. They subtly influence our global palate, appear in unexpected places, and are, in many cases, enjoying a quiet, yet flavorful, renaissance. It's like discovering that your very quiet, unassuming great-grandparent was actually a world-traveling adventurer with a taste for the exotic, a delightful, spicy surprise. There's our first gentle jest for this final leg of our journey. The first thing to remember is that many of these lost flavors were never truly lost to the entire world. They simply took a back seat in European and, by extension, North American cooking for a period. Asafoetida, the devil's dung with the heart of gold, has remained an indispensable cornerstone of Indian vegetarian cuisine for millennia. Its savory magic undiminished. Galangal, with its piney, zesty kick, is still the irreplaceable soul of countless Thai, Indonesian, and Malaysian dishes. Long pepper continues to lend its complex warmth to traditional recipes in India, Nepal, Indonesia, and parts of Africa. Grains of paradise are still cherished in West African stews and spice rubs. Cubeb pepper, though rarer, still features in Indonesian cooking and some North African spice blends. And mastic, of course, remains the signature scent and taste of the Greek island of Chios, and a beloved flavor in many Eastern Mediterranean sweets and liqueurs. Their stories continued, vibrant and unbroken, in their homelands and in diasporic communities around the globe. What's truly fascinating is how these ancient players are now finding their way back onto the broader global stage. There's a growing movement, a quiet culinary curiosity that's leading chefs, craft brewers and distillers, artisan food producers, and adventurous home cooks to actively seek out these historical or heirloom spices. This renewed interest is a verifiable mainstream fact. The rise of specialty spice merchants, often online, has made it easier than ever before to source once obscure ingredients like long pepper, cubeb, or grains of paradise. People are hungry, not just for new flavors, but for flavors with a story, a history, a connection to the past. Suddenly, that 1,000-year-old spice, once a staple, then forgotten, is now considered avant-garde or artisanal. History, it seems, has a wonderfully dry sense of humor and a knack for recycling its best ideas. That's chuckle number 2. For you can see these lingering echoes in unexpected places. Long pepper, with its complex heat and sweetness, is being rediscovered by high-end chefs for its unique profile, adding depth to everything from savory meat dishes to chocolate desserts. Grains of paradise are popping up in craft beers, lending a peppery, aromatic note, and in artisanal gins, contributing to complex botanical blends. Cubeb pepper, too, is a darling of some gin distillers for its cool, aromatic qualities. Even asafoetida is finding a wider audience as more people explore authentic Indian cooking or seek plant-based umami flavors. The very desire for a wide variety of flavors, for a spice rack that boasts more than just salt and black pepper, is itself a legacy of those early spice routes. The Silk Road and the subsequent maritime spice highways didn't just transport goods, they transported desires. They cultivated a taste for the other, for the exotic, for the transformative power of a pinch of something from a faraway land. Our modern, globalized palate, where it's perfectly normal to crave Thai one night, Indian the next, and Ethiopian the day after, is built upon the foundations laid by those ancient traders and the dazzling, unexpected complexity they introduced to Western tables. Our spice racks today are like a harmonious United Nations assembly, but everyone generally gets along and, when combined, tastes absolutely delicious together. And that's our final sleepy jest of the main story. A quirky tidbit for you. You might find echoes of these ancient spices in the most unexpected modern products. Some artisan chocolatiers are experimenting with long pepper or grains of paradise. You might find cubeb in certain complex bitters, used in cocktails. There are even historical confectionery recipes, like certain types of medieval gingerbread, or specific regional biscuits, perhaps passed down through families in quiet corners of Europe that still contain traces of these once common, now unusual, flavorings. Food enthusiasts and historians alike continue to uncover and debate the subtle ways these ancient flavor profiles might have evolved, and how our modern appreciation connects with their storied past. Can a grains of paradise-infused ale today truly replicate the experience of a medieval peasant supping their similarly spiced brew? Probably not exactly. Ingredients change, palates evolve, and our context is entirely different. But the thread of connection, that shared human desire to enhance our food and drink with the magic of spices, remains unbroken. These lingering echoes remind us that the story of spices is a living one. It's not just about dusty caravan trails and forgotten kingdoms. It's about the ongoing human quest for flavor, for connection, for that little something extra that makes a meal, and perhaps life itself, a bit more interesting. The lost flavors of the Silk Road are not entirely lost. They are simply waiting, sometimes in plain sight in other cultures, sometimes in the quiet pages of old recipe books, ready for a new generation to rediscover their magic and weave them back into the ever-revolving tapestry of global cuisine. And so, our long journey tonight, through sun-baked deserts and over snow-capped mountains, across shimmering seas and into the heart of bustling ancient markets, now gently, softly draws to a close. The vibrant aromas of cinnamon and pepper, the ghostly scent of lost Silphium, the sacred essence of spikenard, the surprising zest of galangal, and all those other precious, pungent cargoes of the Silk Road are beginning to mellow and blend into the quiet, peaceful fragrance of your own restful space. You've walked with merchants and mystics, with cooks and kings, and you've seen how these tiny grains, barks, roots, and resins could shape empires, inspire voyages, and transform the very taste of daily life. These spices were more than mere commodities. They were dreams distilled, adventures made tangible, the condensed essence of distant, almost mythical lands, carried with great effort and at great risk to tables thousands of miles away. Now let those tales and those scents become a soft, warm blanket around you. Feel the gentle weight of history, not as a burden, but as a deep, comforting anchor, holding you steady as you drift further and further into serene slumber. There are no more paths to tread tonight, no more spices to identify, no more bustling markets to navigate. There is only the calm, the quiet, and the gentle rhythm of your own breathing, easing you into the deep, restorative peace you so richly deserve. The echoes of the Silk Road are fading into the softest of whispers, inviting you to let go, to relax completely, and to dream sweet, untroubled dreams.